Okay. Good morning and welcome to the PT on Ice daily show with the Institute of Clinical Excellence. My name is Kelly. I'm a TA within our fitness athlete division, coming at you live on Fitness Athlete Friday. Welcome to those that are joining in on this beautiful Friday morning. So our topic for today is bouncing out of the squat. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a dangerous thing? We'll talk about those situations. But first, we have a couple things coming up on our ICE calendar. As far as our live courses coming up, busy weekend in our spine division. We have 2 lumbar spine courses rolling out this weekend in California and Pittsburgh, I believe. You can also catch it next weekend in upstate New York if you are interested in hopping in one of those. The cervical spine course is going off this weekend in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then total spine thrust with Justin Dunaway will be next weekend up in Wisconsin in Milwaukee. So if you're looking to hop into a live course, there's more info on that over at ptonice.com. And then as far as our live courses coming up on Monday, this coming Monday, the telehealth course with Rob Vining is starting. So if you're looking to upgrade your digital practice game, hop in on that. And then the persistent pain course is starting next Monday, the 23rd. I just finished up the last cohort with that, and I would highly recommend it. Add it onto your list of PT Con Ed courses to take for sure. A lot of valuable information. All right, so let's get into our topic. Like I said, we're going to be talking about bouncing out of the squat, all good things and bad things regarding that. So first of all, what is that? What am I saying when I'm saying bouncing out of the squat? With any type of barbell squat, when it starts to get heavy, close to a 1 rep max, you'll often see athletes descend into the squat and then demonstrate a little bit of a rebound out of the bottom of the squat, bottom of the hole, we'll sometimes say, in order to stand up a weight. And so I think there's often a lot of discussion regarding that specific movement that you'll see, saying is it a good thing for the knees, for like to do over and over again. And I often get that question asked to me too from some fitness athletes as just looking for guidance along that. So I think it's a helpful conversation to have and know when to utilize it, when to not utilize it, and how to almost coach your way through it. So before we get into that discussion, I found an article that I wanted to share with you that was pretty interesting. It's by Ken Leon, and it's called The Biomechanical Study on the Effects the Effects of Bouncing in Front Squats. So they utilize the front squat, which is where the barbell is resting on the front of the shoulders while you're in a front rack position. And what they did was they evaluated the differences in performance and the biomechanics of 2 different variations, one being the dynamic front squat, which is when you can utilize that bounce at the bottom of the squat. And then they also utilized a front squat with a 2-second pause at the bottom of the squat. So as the athlete descends, they have to stop at the bottom, hold for 1, 2, and then they were cued to be able to stand back up. So the most notable information that I found was, obviously, as you could probably guess with me, the dynamic front squat yielded in a larger weight able to lift, yielded in a more successful or heavier lift than that 2-second pause version. However, this was kind of surprising to me. The difference between the 2 1 rep maxes was only about, on average for these athletes, they used 19 athletes, the difference was only about 12 pounds plus or minus 15. The percentage on that was 4.5%. So I was a little surprised with that. I figured it would be heavier, but I figured it would be a larger difference when you get to utilize a bounce. And then when they got into the biomechanical analysis of the 2 different squats, they broke up the concentric phase of the squat into 5 different phases, one being the bottom of the squat position. Then the second one was the peak moment phase, which was when the total support moment between the ankle, knee, and hip joints was the largest. And then the start of the sticking region, the end of the sticking region, which was evaluated by speed on the barbell, the velocity on the barbell. And then the last phase was the minimum moment, right? Yes, minimum moment phase, so towards the top of the squat. So the couple of differences that they found between these 2 squat variations was the bottom position of the squat was actually deeper with the pause squat by 3.3 degrees. So when you're sitting at the bottom of the squat, having to hold a heavy max load for 2 seconds, the easiest way to do that was sink all the way down, let the back of the thigh kind of rest on the back of the calves before standing up. So that makes it, once I thought about that, I was like, okay, that makes sense, that it would be a little bit deeper. So that's important. We'll talk about that later in the discussion. And then one of the other notable differences was with that peak moment phase. With the dynamic front squat, there was a larger peak moment phase that specifically the knee joint took compared to the other two joints. And which makes sense. When we're in a front squat position, we have a more upright torso. The moment arm on that knee joint is larger than that of a back squat, for example, where the hip and the knees share a little bit more of that moment. So what they concluded was that the knee joint takes a little bit more peak force, or rather peak moment arm, with the dynamic squat compared to your pause front squat, which is also a helpful piece of information. The sticking region occurred in the same portion of the squat. However, with the dynamic squat, the velocity was a little higher, which makes sense. And then other than that, the execution of the two squats was pretty similar. Like the angle of the torso, the angle of the thigh was pretty similar. So interesting study. I will try to post a link to this article if you'd like to read in further. There's a lot of good information that explains it in more detail, so I'll try to post that on the comments in Facebook for you all. So basically, we know that why is the bounce a good thing? Let's start with that. So obviously, it results in a more heavier lift. And so when your sport is evaluated by, the performance of your sport is evaluated by how much you can lift, even though it's only maybe 10 to 15, 20 pounds, that is actually really big. So when we're talking about Olympic weightlifting athletes and CrossFit athletes that are trying to work up to a 1 rep max, that's huge. So I would say it's a good thing. Let's utilize it. What's happening that allows you to lift more weight is the phenomenon known as the stretch shortening cycle. So as you descend into the squat, through that eccentric portion, the muscles are lengthening and they're developing more force before the concentric phase even starts. So that makes it a little bit easier to then use that momentum, bounce out of the bottom, and stand back up. When you stick in a 2-second pause in between that eccentric and concentric phase, the delay in that pre-stretch effects decays the force that is helpful to stand back up. So that means your muscles have to generate more force to then create that concentric phase. So that's kind of a little bit of the science around why that's helpful. So if the bounce at the bottom of the squat makes your squat faster, a little bit easier in nature, it's going to increase your performance. I would say it's an advantage. It's helpful. So that's why I think it's a good thing. On the other hand, why it could be potentially a bad thing is this study showed that there's an increased moment arm at the knee. And so with that increased speed, moment arm, that results in a little bit increased shear or compressive forces at the knee joint. And so if that's the case, then you could say there is a slight increased risk of injury. Now, is it enough increased shear or compressive force to be considered dangerous for the knee? Maybe that's a different conversation, but we know from other studies that take a look at, for example, weightlifters who are squatting multiple times per session, multiple times per week, that they show healthy, thick ligaments, tendons, joint spaces. So I would argue that it's not necessarily considered to be dangerous, but it is important information that we can apply when we're talking about rehabbing athletes, say with knee pain, for example. So if we know when you add that bounce, obviously it's probably going to be with a heavier load, more speed. That could be more symptomatic for someone squatting with knee pain. And so we can utilize this information by maybe starting the athlete squatting back. They might tolerate a back squat better because, again, that moment arm is a little bit more shared with the hip and the knee versus more on the knee. And then introduce that front squat position, exposing the knee into new forces with more of a tempo squat, adding the pause at the bottom. You can also sell this to your athlete because they're way harder. No one likes to do those, I'm thinking. But you can sell this to your athlete like, hey, you're going to get more strength development in the bottom of that. Joseph is laughing too. You agree? Good. but you're going to get more strength development at the bottom of the squat, which makes sense. And then it also helps with mobility. We know a lot of time under tension at the bottom end ranges will help with mobility too. So the pause squats are really helpful in that nature. So I think it's important to note too, a lot of I think maybe bad talk regarding that bounce at the bottom of the squat is I think a lot of people think you're bottoming out of the bottom of the squat, that you're losing tension underneath the bar and then relying on the end range of your joints to be able to like bounce into and out of and stand back up. And that's definitely something I see while I'm coaching, while I'm working with athletes, and just what I've seen as participating in the sport by along with these athletes. But that's actually not quite what's a proper bounce. You're maintaining tension really well, and then it looks like a nice clean lift. Sometimes I'll see fitness athletes or CrossFit athletes bounce into the bottom of the hole and kind of lose all that tension and then stand up looking really sloppily. And that's not what I'm saying is a good thing. That's not what I'm saying is a helpful adaptation or technique to utilize to lift more weight. We know that this is the case because that study that I just referenced, the bottom position in the pause squat was actually 3.3 degrees deeper. So I don't think it's necessarily, if done well, not a bottoming out of the squat and like driving into the end range of your joint. So that's, I think, something to just clarify. I think it's common that a lot of athletes, when they're squatting, will demonstrate it poorly and lose all that tension, and then they're never really developing that squat in the bottom of the hole, which can lead to difficulty in maintaining like trunk stiffness while we're squatting. And also, like, I think of that person that can clean a barbell to their shoulders but can't stand it up out of the hole. They don't have that strength when they're stuffed in the bottom. So we don't want to be that person. And so that's why I think it depends on when and where it's utilized that this is a good thing. So my take-home message essentially is that the bounce is more of a skill in order to increase performance, whereas it's not a way to train 100% of the time. So when I'm thinking about when I might utilize that bounce at the bottom is, say I'm about to attempt a 1 rep max clean and jerk. If I can do anything to maybe increase that load on the bar by 10 to 15 pounds, it's huge. If I can do anything to make it feel a little bit easier so I can set myself up for a better jerk, absolutely going to use it. When I'm attempting a 5x5 back squat for strength gains, I'm not going to necessarily recommend relying on that bounce at the bottom of the hole, because I think you're missing out on a lot of strength gains that could be had if either demonstrating a nice controlled motion or even incorporating more pause squats. I think those are really helpful in strength training as well as rehab, for that matter. So the pause has a lot of pros to it because it can increase that mobility, increase a little bit of your strength training, and perhaps maybe a little less injury risk associated with it too. So that's pretty much my message with regarding the the front squat, back squat, bouncing out of the bottom of that squat. And so lastly, if you know anything about me, as I read this article, you know I took that as essentially a challenge. The fact that the athletes were able to 1 rep max this much and then were able to 1 rep max with a pause front squat only about 4.5% less, I really was like, okay, I got to check myself because that seems like a really tough task to do. I was thinking like, what's my 1 rep? I don't know. So yes, I tried it. So what I was able to do was a 250-pound dynamic front squat. And then I really surprised myself. This is a little bit of a humble brag, but I was able to pause front squat 240 pounds. And the way they did this study was you could wear whatever footwear you wanted. So everyone chose to wear weightlifting shoes. So I wore weightlifting shoes, but you could not use knee sleeves or a belt in this study. So I didn't use that at all. And so I was really I'm proud of myself that I had some good strength at the bottom there to stand up a pretty heavy lift close to my 1 rep max. So what I challenge you is, if you would like any excuse to really max out, but if you'd like to evaluate yourself, go ahead and give this a try and let me know how it goes. I think if there's a large difference between the two lifts, the dynamic front squat and your pause front squat, it might be a good idea to kind of reevaluate how are you training your squat, how's your technique. It can highlight some maybe some faults that are there that we don't always want to rely on that back squat with. So feel free to give that a try. Message me, tag me on Instagram, whatever it may be. I'll post my 2 squats after this, as well as the link to that article. But have fun with it. And other than that, have a great weekend, and we'll be back on Monday with more PT on Ice.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.